this camp?
Yeah, it's been very productive. You set out a clear objective. You start the spring, everybody does it a little bit different. I mean, we know what the rules of engagement are, but for what we wanted to accomplish, we feel pretty good about where we're at.
Welcome in, Falcons fans. It's your boy Bryce Lewis back at it again for more Falcons talk, and we bring a special guest onto the show today. Sports Illustrated reporter, writer, Daniel Flick. How are you today, sir?
Bryce, man, I'm happy to be back on. It's been a lot of fun lately. It's been a busy few weeks, but drought period between camp and training camp and that whole stretch that everybody loves so much, where there's just nothing going on. But it's been fun. It's been a nice little break from that side of things, a little refresher before the season kicks off, and ready to get going, man. Happy to be on.
Yeah, man. Glad to have you on, man. It's been a while. Been a while since you've been on last time. So glad to have you back. So listen, minicamp OTAs have passed for the Falcons. First look at the team for a lot of people. I know they had the open practice at the Bends. People, went out there to see what the team looks like. Overall, getting right into it, just overall, what are your impressions of what you have seen and heard from the Falcons from the minicamp OTA period?
Yeah, I think it's been, obviously pads aren't on yet, so you can't take a ton from the on-field portion of what's been done. But I think what you can pull is what you've seen has been a very, very focused group, a very, I guess you could say, intent group. There's very, it's not like in years past it hasn't been there, but I think with this group, you see a collective group of individuals who are laser focused on winning. And I mean, obviously with a really good free agency class and a pretty good draft class as well, there's a lot of guys that have kind of filled, some of the holes that existed last year. And, one of the quotes that's kind of on this topic here was from Drake London a few weeks ago. He was talking about how him and so many of the free agents have kind of gelled quickly. And he was just talking about how it's the type of men that Arthur Smith brings in. And I think that's kind of aids my point of, like, there's a collective focus and a collective goal. This is a group that's looked, pretty good. I'm not, obviously, there's been some, I guess, errors that you would expect for this time of year, right? But I mean, it is what it is, right? Like it's training camp, it's not training camp, it's OTAs, mini camp. My brain's kind of gone today, but it's been a good group. There's a lot of lot of high character guys on this team. And I think the one thing that's really stuck out as well is just there's been a lot of guys who put in a lot of work already, and if there's really been high chemistry, highly competitive group. And I think so far they're off to a pretty good start.
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately what you want to hear. Obviously, this is like, I feel like OTAs minicamp is kind of the building blocks, the kind of the groundwork, start installing some stuff just to get some working before they get into this break and then get into camp. So we're going to go into more players here. So obviously, who I got to start with. QB1, Desmond Ridder. Obviously, he's been a guy who every throw will be scrutinized. Every throw will be analyzed. What have you heard or seen from OTAs in minicamp when it comes to Desmond? Is he looking good? We've seen some good clips. We've seen, him miss some throws. That happens. Obviously, everybody does it. But what are you hearing overall with him? Is their progression looks pretty good so far compared to 1 to 2?
Yeah, Arthur Smith, has talked about this a lot, and he actually called out the people who have, the 2 throws of being like, hey, we're not gonna overreact. We're not gonna hype up a guy for 1 good throw, 1 bad throw. We're not gonna tear him down. It is what it is, right? He talked about progression. There's been a lot of progression as well. And I think everyone's kind of cited that he's always been a confident individual, but it's really taken another step, this spring, taking over that QB1 role and kind of taking a real hold of the team. And, everybody around him just talks about how great of a leader he is. Obviously, everybody's heard that. And I think there's kind of a perception of like, hey, what about on the field? He's been fine. Accuracy has not been a huge concern as far as what, we've been able to see and everything. And I don't really think, again, you're not going to really find out a whole lot more until pads come on and speed kind of picks up and everything. But, for the most part, I think it's been a positive positive first few months for him at the helm. And, obviously it's, his main test will come in the next few weeks, or, a few weeks after training camp, and then working into preseason. And then obviously you won't really know until, you get that first third and 8 or, whatever it might be. But, so far everybody just brings up how hard of a worker he is, just really, really, showing up early, leaving late. Arthur Smith kind of laughed at that notion a little bit, but it's true for him. He's really a competitive dude, laser focused, and, he's got that team's respect. They believe in him. They trust in him. And there's a lot of optimism surrounding what he can do.
Yeah, that's definitely good. I mean, you want to hear those things. Obviously, if the team buys into him, that's going to mean good things for him. Obviously, just seeing his progression is going to be one of the key important things that we're going to want to continue to look at as time goes on, especially going into camp. Another question. So we're going to go actually to special teams here. Obviously,
okay.
Williams, injury out for the year probably. So now they got to find a new kick return, punt returner. Cordell kind of was the second guy last year. I don't know if they want to use him there again this year. We've heard guys, Penny Hart. We've heard Bijan take some reps. Other guys as well. What do you think that returner position is going to look like moving forward? Because Avery was pretty good at it when he was back there as a specialist.
Yeah. No, honestly, Avery Williams is a big loss, man. I think a lot of people have kind of overlooked that. I think he led the NFL in punt return yards last year. Or yards per punt return. He was a really valuable piece on that whole unit, really. So obviously hoping for a quick recovery for him. But elsewhere, I think Penny Hart is the guy that I keep kind of coming back to as he's probably the favorite. There's a lot of guys they've been trying out back there, even Bijan. I don't think that's the way they'll go, but I think Penny Hart, when you look at the Falcons receivers room at the moment, is not exactly deep, and it's not like carrying him with an eye towards returnability would necessarily be, that harmful to them, and the way they want their receivers room to shape up. And so I think Penny Hart, when you look at what he's done, what he can do, I think he's probably the most logical solution. At kick returner, I think with Bijan in the fold, I think you'll see Patterson end up taking a heavier load as a kick returner this year than last year, because last year he was such a big part of the offense. Throw him back there as much as they really probably wanted to, as much as he wanted to. But it's something he loves doing. It's something that they obviously, he's proven he's very good at. They know he's very good at it. And so I think I would look for him to probably be the leader there, but I do think you'll probably see whoever wins, the job and as punt returner, probably, see a fair number of returns as well on kickoffs. Again, I would expect that to be Penny Hart, but obviously, again, wide open competition that you're not going to really learn a whole lot more about for another month or two, really, until pads come on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, having effective special teams is obviously big in the league. Wake, who we expect him to, still be solid. I think they get, Pinion's been a solid punter. You just want to make sure when it comes to maybe field position, you got a guy who can maybe make a play, maybe even break one, which is big, obviously, if you have that as a third threat in your third unit. So next question is, all right, so defensively, Ryan Nielsen, defense coordinator, trying to install his stuff, trying to get his system in place. Can you give us an update on how that's been going with the defense? I know Cordell made a comment about that the other day, that they've kind of seen him throw some stuff at him. There's a lot of different looks they're throwing at him. So how is that looking right now for the defense as he's trying to get that into mesh with this new system?
Yeah, dude. Okay, so the moment that I met Ryan Nielsen way back at the Shrine Bowl when he first joined the team, like, you're shaking his hand, like introducing yourself, doing all that stuff. Guy is intense, dude. Like, even from the very first moment that you see him, it's like, whoa. Like, this is a guy who is very, very intent with what he wants to do, and the intensity that he brings carries over to everybody around him. One of my favorite stories I've heard from the OTA session came from Jeff Okuda. Actually, he was talking about how the very first OTA session they had, Ryan Nielsen pointed out that they were ready before the offense was, and that therefore they were already ahead of and beating the offense. And he's like, that was the moment for me where, like, my eyes opened. I was like, okay, this guy lives, like, eats, sleeps, breathes competition. And so I think, that's the one thing about him. You go back to competitiveness, you go back to intensity, drive, obviously really good talent developer up front. He has the full respect of that locker room. I don't want to overstate that. I said that with Ritter as well, and I'm going to say it with Ryan Nielsen. Those are two of, a handful of individuals individuals on this team. I think it's a pretty special team in that regard. There's a lot of proven leaders who have full respect, but like it's not very common that you'll see newcomers come in and get that type of respect right away. But with Ryan Nielsen, I mean, you can't say enough good things, I think, about how he started. I mean, there's a lot of hype right now about him. I mean, that team, that defense loves him. They are competing, and the way that he's wired is just really, really passionate. And it's already just feeding right on down to, whatever position group it may be that he's working with on that day. And I mean, he's, obviously he still has his hand in some talent development up front, even though he's, kind of no longer in that role. But again, really just a very impressive start, very, very intelligent. I mean, I think that's the one thing you've heard from pretty much everybody, but Calais Campbell had a really good quote about that. He's just like, I mean, football IQ just off the charts. Like, I mean, that's the one thing he talked about. He watched film with him, and obviously working with him lately. Just very intelligent football mind, very passionate, very detail oriented. So pretty good start. All things considered, pretty good start for Ryan Nielsen in his first couple months on the job.
Yeah, that's definitely good. I mean, I know when he initially got hired, I know some people were kind of like, kind of on the fence. I mean, some people really liked it. Some people were like, I don't know. But I think over time, I think he's going to win some people over. I think obviously he's won the team over. I think especially the defense. Obviously, defensive line, that's his group. That's his specialty. Yeah. So, I think that overall, I think that's really good just to see that, that relationship and that is working. And obviously, with Arthur Smith being a line guy too, I wasn't surprised just because they're both line guys. And I think he wants somebody who understands trenches are very important. So switching to the offensive side now, how overall has the offense looked? Obviously, Kyle hasn't played. We know he's been still nursing injury, trying to get back. Drake's been out there. We got to call him, like, bearded Drake now. He's doing his thing. Yeah. Obviously incorporating Bijan. We've seen and heard videos of him slide, raw the backfield. Obviously just regular running back, plan to use him everywhere. So far, what is this offense looking like? Because Arthur Smith made a comment the other day about a lot of the stuff we're doing now, if Matt Ryan came in now, would be like, what is this?
Yeah. I mean, it's there's for sure a lot of moving parts, and you can tell kind of they're still in the phase of trying to incorporate all the parts, and I think they've kind of talked about how they're still, not really showing a whole lot of what's to come. And again, it's, I'm going to, I guess resort back to that answer again, and we'll see more in training camp once, the offensive linemen kind of start, blocking a little bit more and you get more of a real feel for how that's going to go. But, overall, it's been a good start. I think you've seen Drake London obviously has been, impressive. And I mean, he looks physically really good. I think Tyler Algier came back in probably even better shape than he was in last year. Patterson's obviously kind of, as we talked about, not going to be in as big of a role running the football, which, they're going to probably put him out wide a little bit more, put him in the slot a little bit, use him as more of an offensive weapon. And so to me, it's the type of deal, I think, where you kind of get it. Production so far, efficiency, the overall operation's been pretty good. It's not, obviously I'm sure they would like for some things to have been a little bit smoother, but again, you're going to get missed throws, you're going to get quote unquote penalties, right? For this phase, it won't all be smooth. And obviously we have seen several lowlights that have come out of it, right? But I think the overall takeaway from the offense has to be that this is a group that believes it has a lot of potential. And so far you see how, as you mentioned, all the parts that they have that have been, again, you're not going to see them in full force, but you can see the vision for them. And you see Robinson being used out wide in the slot, wherever it might be, catching passes, catching very, very, very tough passes, frankly, on the perimeter. I mean, he's been as advertised, I would say. Arthur Smith said the other day they do not have buyer's remorse, which obviously is what you'd like to hear from your coach after 2 months, number 8 overall pick. But so again, you can see the vision. You can see that they've got a good blend of athletes who can really make stuff happen. And I think that's kind of the important takeaway, is that so far, when they drafted Bijan, there was a kind of a thought of, how are they going to make everything work? And I think so far you've just seen, whether it's Jonnu Smith, who's kind of been used everywhere, or again, even a guy like Patterson or Algier, Robinson, like whoever it might be, like you've got a lot of weapons there. And it's not, I think, one other note on the offense, Mac Hollins has been very impressive in the locker room, and just the impact he's had on that group has been very, very impressive, you know. And I think that's another underrated attribute there, is that he's brought a very good veteran presence. You know, I think some people might have looked at him and said, you know, we saw how Brian Edwards worked out last year. What's the, you know, is there kind of a similar concern here? You get a guy who had one really good year in Las Vegas, you know, you bring him to Atlanta. How's that going to work out? So far, Matt Collins, again, you know, you'll see more on-field stuff in the next month or so, but the guy has already proven to be very, very valuable inside the locker rooms of Flowery Branch.
Yeah, that's definitely good. I mean, also, I think people forget Matt Collins actually, I believe, was a captain on the Miami Dolphins. So, you know, leadership has always been one of his biggest strengths as a receiver, and he can help lead by example with Drake London in that receiving room for the young receivers that they have on the roster. So, obviously, shifting a little bit as camp is a month away, but we're getting closer to that point. What battle is the one battle that you would keep your eye on the most going into training camp?
Nickel corner, Bryce. I am very, very eager to watch that play out. D. Alford, Clark Phillips, Mike Hughes. I mean, you got three guys there who, frankly, I think everybody kind of entered OTAs expecting Hughes to really kind of be the leader in the competition there, because he got a $7 million contract, which actually was higher than what Isaiah Oliver got in San Francisco, right? And so, again, you got a new coordinator, obviously, and Ryan Nielsen that kind of negated Oliver's versatility in the way that they used him last year, which kind of, you know, was what it was, right? But I mean, with Alford in particular, you got a guy who's just really, really athletic, really fast. He's up to 181 pounds. He played last year at 175, all muscle. I mean, he's faster, stronger. I mean, he's in great shape. He's played well, very competitive. Ryan Nielsen loves him. Arthur Smith has long been a very big fan of his. And so I think you've kind of seen that shift from Hughes, who had the, you know, larger money contract and was kind of the perceived favorite, kind of shifted it into Alford's favor a little bit. Now, again, you know, rotation in this time of year is not going to be the, you know, end all be all. It's all about positioning yourself for, you know, what's to come and, you know, throughout the preseason, everything there. But I think when you look at that whole competition, Clark Phillips, I think he's a guy that when he got drafted, my first thought is by, you know, mid-season, he's probably the starter at nickel. But you haven't really seen him kind of mixed in with that group a whole lot lately, or I mean, so far. So, you know, it's the type of deal where very talented individual, very driven, very competitive, had a great college career at Utah, highly productive, you know, captain. I mean, really impressive, you know, profile. But I think the Falcons have proven historically, and they're doing again so far this year, that they're not going to throw rookies into the lineup, you know, that early. Like, I'm pretty sure last year Drake London was like a third, fourth string receiver on the first preseason depth chart, right? And you know, that wasn't obviously everybody knew that's not what it was going to end up like, but there's definitely a sense of we're going to make you prove it, and I think right now that's where the Falcons are at with Clark Phillips. And I think with Alford, you really just have to look at what he's done last year. You know, I mean, he was very impressive in limited action last year, had a few rough games here and there, but also made a very, you know, very high amount of impressive, impactful plays as well. And so I think that's a big takeaway from what he did. Mike Hughes, what he's done the last few years, you kind of want to see a little bit more. So while a lot of people thought the contract was a bit much, we'll see how that plays out. The Falcons do have an out in that contract after 2023 if they want it. So again, we'll see how he does. Obviously, training camp will be a very, very big time for him. But I think nickel corner, to answer the overall question, nickel corner will be a very fascinating battle to watch play out. Left guard, I think, is another one. Matt Hennessy's been working with the first team, not Matthew Bergeron, who's second round pick out of Syracuse, who I personally thought would be, you know, week one starter, and I think probably still will be. But again, same deal as what we had last year with London. You know, you're probably looking at a guy who's going to start a little lower, and then by the time it comes to actually play competitive football, you'll see Matthew Bergeron probably ascend into working with the starters. But left guard, nickel corner, those are the main two for me. I'll be curious to watch how everything shakes out at wide receiver after Drake London. You have a lot of unknown. I tend to think Matt Collins is a pretty safe bet to probably not only make the roster, but enter as a, you know, second wideout. Now, again, with that being said, as we've talked about, the offense has so many, you know, exciting versatile pieces on it that, I mean, really, if you're the second wideout, you might not see the field more than 50% of the snaps, right? And so that's one thing I'll be curious to see, kind of see how that plays out behind him, whether it's Scotty Miller, even Penny Hart, you know, the guys who are kind of in that relative mix I think are going to be interesting to watch them play out. But there's for sure a lot to watch, you know. I mean, second safety, will it be Richie Grant? Will it be Jalen Hawkins? I think Richie Grant has a very high likelihood of winning that job. But again, Falcons do like Jalen Hawkins quite a bit. He had a very good spring. So for sure a lot to watch. But I tend to think, you know, probably 2 or 3 starting spots, like for sure up for grabs. It should be probably relatively close to 50-50 right now, maybe a little bit more like 60-40 in terms of left guard, but should be fun to watch that play out.
Yeah, for sure. I guess that goes to my next question. Do you, with so much competition at the cornerback spot, do you see the Falcons maybe keeping one extra corner this year, maybe potentially? Because, I mean, they did bring a lot of guys, a lot of competition. A lot of guys at nickel. I mean, obviously you would think Jeff Okudah and AJ are the 2 starters. I mean, do you cut, like, I mean, you would think maybe Clark Phillips, you know, 4th round pick, maybe makes it. The same thing, Mike, maybe, you know, like, and then you still got Trey Flowers. They haven't mentioned him yet. So, like, do you think they maybe go 6 guys? Or maybe one guy doesn't.
Yeah, and I think the other part about them going a little heavier at corner is the fact that they might go lighter at safety as well. Because if you look at the way that the safety room is configured, obviously, Richie Grant, Hawkins and Jesse Bates is obviously in that mix too. Probably, you know, top of the line safety, free safety. Put Richie Grant at safety, strong safety in the box is probably the way that'll go, and then Hawkins will rotate in as safety 3 is how I'd expect that to go. But, you know, you got a few other guys. I mean, you got Abernathy's, you know, he's been in the program for a little bit now. And so he's a guy that, you know, could make the cut, you know, pretty solid spring for him. And so, but again, I think you're going to see him probably lean heavier at corner. Because again, they do have a lot of bodies there. Terrell, Okudah, you mentioned Trey Flowers. Again, he's a guy that can also play safety, you know, if they wanted to. That's one thing Arthur Smith is very fond of is cross-training and having guys who can play corner and safety. They love that about Isaiah Oliver. And frankly, if they would have brought him back, that would have been probably one of the key reasons as to why. But, you know, I mean, even Alford can play safety if he has to, right? Like, I mean, they've got a lot of guys there who are, you know, if you look at the overall makeup of the cornerback room, it's athletic, intelligent, versatile, physical is another one I'd throw in there. And so I think when you look at that, you've got a lot of guys whose skill set can, in theory, translate to play safety if you need them to. And so corner, again, you've got probably, I would say Terrell, Okudah, Alford, Hughes, and Phillips are all very safe bets to end up on a roster. You've got Cornell Armstrong in that group as well. You've got Trey Flowers in that group. Abernathy's in that group. Again, he's more of a safety, but still, if you're looking at 3 DBs versus, you know, what I guess however it's going to end up shaking out. But, you know, as far as safety depth is probably going to end up being the main factor in that. I think they'll carry 3 is where I'm going to guess, and then they'll probably end up carrying 6 corners. But again, a lot of those guys have the ability to play safety if need be. And I think that's probably the way that they'll end up approaching that. Of course, you have the extra elevation on game day if you want it, which could always be used for safety as well. But again, I tend to think that just from the way the roster's made up, it's very, very corner heavy. And I think they'll probably I think it's probably part of the main focus for them is adding corners who can play safety if needed. And I think they've accomplished that feat. And so I think you'll probably see them end up, like I said, carrying 6 corners and 3 safeties is what I would expect them to do.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was wondering about that just because, like I said, you bring a lot of depth into that position. I know sometimes it's tough. You want it for competition, but obviously you understand that there's a chance, everybody's going to make it. So it's going to be interesting to really see how that battle plays out.
Yeah,
as we get closer to training camp and into training camp as well. But now let's switch back up to the front. Obviously, the defensive line, that's going to be a very looked at position. There's no additions to the D-line. I think people feel probably as good about this D-line as they have in a while. Especially in the interior, you expect them at least maybe to be a better run defense team. One thing I always said was that the Falcons sometimes would get out physical last year in the front. Now they've added guys like Calais, Eddie Goldman came back from retirement, and other guys that they've added that can help out in the interior. But obviously the big question is the edge. You bring back, Arnold, you think he hopefully takes that next step in year 2. You brought in Bud Dupree. One guy that I'm keeping my eye on is D'Angelo Malone, a guy who I feel like in limited time didn't play bad. I just feel like he just didn't get a lot of play time. And I wonder if this year maybe is there maybe more of a agenda to get him more PT potentially in the pass rush. What is that looking like at the defensive end, that pass rush spot forward?
Yeah, a lot of bodies. As I think, if you look at years past, it's been a struggle. But, there's not many other ways to sum it up. It's been a really big struggle. I mean, you look at the last 2 years, the Falcons have, I think, 39 combined sacks, which is 23 behind the team that's in second to last league-wide in that same time span. Like, 39 sacks from the last 2 years combined would have put them middle of the pack for last year alone. It's been obviously a rough go. But again, this year I think there's probably more reason for optimism around this edge group than any other. I mean, frankly, than in years past with the edge group, probably more optimism now than probably the last 5-6 years. There's a lot of excitement around it. I think one of the things that you mentioned, Calais Campbell, one of the things he's talked about a lot is that he's really excited about working with Ebiketie, Malone, Ogundeji, the younger guys who he feels like have a lot of potential. But you bring in, obviously, again, you bring in Calais, you bring in Ryan Nielsen, you bring in 2 guys there who are very, proven working up front. Calais, obviously, in my personal opinion, the way that I view him is as a coach who will also probably provide 5 sacks and about 14 quarterback hits, which is about the best possible coach you can have, right? And so I think that's he's been very vocal that he thinks he can play a part in helping, the next Falcons pass rushers pretty much. And so I think you look at Ebiketie last year, he was really turning a corner before he kind of hurt his forearm, I believe week 12, missed the week after that, kind of never found his rhythm, kind of had his playing time drop as well because he still wasn't fully healthy. Again, you could kind of see where he was trending, though, prior to that injury. He had a really good game against Chicago in week 11 and then started off really hot against Washington in week 12 and then got hurt in that game. And so I think there's a lot of excitement there around him. I think with Malone, I'll be curious. I think there's a chance he moves more to off ball with what Ryan Nielsen has done historically and, the way that he kind of was used towards the end of last year. He played a little bit more in space than on the line, which I think is fine for him and the way that his skill set is, right? But I think there's reason for optimism surrounding him. And then you mentioned Bud Dupree. He said in his very first press conference that hey, I'm as healthy as I've been since 2020. And, you'd expect him to say something along those lines, but he brought up, recovering from his ACL, then he got hurt again. And then last year he got hurt again. It's just a bunch of, nonstop injuries and rehab and all that stuff. He feels fresh. Obviously we'll see if he, everybody kind of says, obviously it's kind of famous by now about I'm in, top shape of my life right now. It's kind of routine, right? But with Bud, I think there's real reason to think that he is, or perhaps not, top shape of his life, but top shape of the last 3 years. And in 2020, he was trending for his second straight year of at least 10.5 sacks. I don't think you'll see that kind of production out of him, but I think you'll probably see, if he can get back to a fair level, probably another 4 to 5 sack guy. And then you factor in Calais Campbell on the edge. You got all the guys on the inside. You've got Ogundeji, Ebiketie, Malone, who's obviously got some upside that I think could be tapped into this year as well. And so I think as a whole, the edge group, really competitive group, really tough group, athletic, especially, as you kind of trend down the age spectrum. Sorry about that, Calais, if you're watching, but you've got a lot of reasons for excitement, I think. And I think there's a lot of faith inside, Arthur Smith has mentioned it, that they love the defensive staff that they've put together. And then you factor in some of the player-led leadership on I guess within the whole front seven, but really on the whole unit, just really, really player-led. That there's real reason for optimism that they've got high upside guys who can hit that upside much sooner than, maybe some would have expected last year. And so I think it's very feasible, I think, that the Falcons top their previous 2-year total this year alone. Whether that ends up being a top 10, top 5 pass rush, we'll see. But I do think there's a fair chance that they end up with pressure rates and things of that nature being at least middle of the pack, if not a little bit higher, maybe trending top 10, which from where they've been for the last few years would be huge.
Yeah, definitely. And I think obviously if they do that, that'll help the entire defense, help the secondary, help linebackers, everything.
Oh, yeah.
Pass rush makes everything go. You can have an average secondary, but elite pass rush, you can still have a very successful defense. So we got a few more minutes, like 6 more minutes left, Daniel. Any last notes or anything from OTAs or minicamp that you want to mention that we haven't gotten to yet?
Yeah, I think the one thing I want to send a message, maybe more so, I think it's important to understand that the Falcons have whatever expectations you have for them, the Falcons inside that building have higher expectations. I mean, they have been unafraid to bring up playoffs, Super Bowls, things of that nature that have at times in the past few years felt, at this time of year, not likely, right? And I think you look at the way that things have changed. I mean, you've got guys in that locker room who haven't, been above 500 in their careers. Drake London the other day was talking about how he thinks there's a collective sense of confidence now that wasn't really there last year. He's one of those guys that hasn't been above 500. I think you can see it already. There's young guys in there that have not really won that much, that have that confidence from all the veterans who've been brought in who have won, and there's real reason for, confidence that this Falcons team is not going to be the same Falcons team that's been put on the field for the last 6 years, I believe, as the last time they made the playoffs, 2017. There's reason to believe that this year's team can be much improved. And I think so far you've seen a group that has the right intangibles. So, I think that's the one thing. I'm a big believer in intangibles, and I think that the Falcons have all of the ingredients to be a playoff team. It's going to come down to how Ritter plays. I think if he can play at a serviceable level, I think they have enough pieces around him, and they've proven to have those pieces so far, just with the high quality of leadership that, so many of those free agent ads have brought. And it just, even the product that we've been able to see so far, it's been, improved. And I think the overall program is improved. And so I think there's a lot of reason for excitement. And I think it could be a very enjoyable 2023, 2024 NFL season for the Falcons and obviously all of the entire Falcons fan base, hopefully after several trying years, right? So lots of optimism, and I think so far that optimism has been rewarded. So a lot of positives is how I'll frame it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously that's the next step. I mean, Drake said it all, like we're thinking playoffs, we're thinking 20 games, we're thinking all of those things. The expectations are high within the organization, and they believe that this is the year for them to truly break through. Obviously, listen, national media is going to be up and down on them. Some like them, some think they're the worst team in the league just because it's Desmond. but I mean, that's just how it is. It's just how it is. So, we're going to have to see. But also, I have some confidence in this team. I think they put a really well team put together, and obviously people know out of Arthur Smith's regime here, this is probably his most talented team since he's been in it. But I appreciate you, Daniel, for coming on to the show. Let everybody know where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Bryce, as always. I'm on Twitter at DFlickDraft, and then you can find all my articles at si.com/Falcons or si.com/NFL/Falcons. I have been known to write quality articles from time to time, on very rare occasion, depending on who you ask. But no, I tend to plug the stuff that I think is okay on Twitter. So if there's anything of value there, I would probably click if I were you. I would appreciate you if you did. Yeah. So no, as always, I'm thrilled to come on. Really enjoyed it. Happy to come on again whenever you want me to, brother.
Yes, sir. Definitely, man. Definitely in the future. Definitely, we got to do that for sure. But that's all we got for you, Falcons fans. Training camp is almost here, 1 month away. Be exciting time to see what the Atlanta Falcons look like going into this season. It's your boy Bryce Lewis signing out.